All right, guys. Good evening, and thank you so much for joining Volume 11 of Nightcrawlers. As always, I am Angel, your host for tonight, and I usually talk about Nightcrawlers and introduce the events. However, for tonight, we're gonna go straight into the interview. Guys, Josh is in New York at the moment. He woke up super early just to be with us, so that's awesome. So if you guys could please, if you can, of course, if you could please turn on your camera so that, Josh feels like he's talking to like an actual person, that would really help us out. So if you could please turn on your camera, that would be amazing. All right. And guys, we have an amazing host. Josh is the owner and podcaster of Small Business Japan. Josh, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me on, Head.
How are you? How do you feel?
Good. I'm waking up. It's one of those miracle mornings in a way.
That's good. What time is it over there?
Was it 5:30? Well, close to 6 a.m. Yeah, about 6 a.m. probably. Still dark. Little by little, we'll see some light. We sort of live in the forest, so it kind of hides the light a little bit, but it should be lit up by the end of the conversation. I think my cat is back there, if you can see.
Awesome. Do you usually wake up early?
No. Well, I mean, in general, our schedules have gotten a little free, I guess you could say. But overall, it's my wife, Satomi, and the two kids, and we all probably get up about 7:30, 8, and that's just, we're sort of off alarm clocks now, and we just all kind of wake up there. Sometimes the kids get up a little bit earlier, but it's usually around that time, just by circadian clock.
I got it. So guys, we usually we have a conversation and then we have a Q&A session. However, as we did during the last episode, we really want you guys to interact with Josh if possible. If you guys have any questions for Josh, you can type on the chat. If you want to ask him directly, then just type it on the chat. If you want me to ask him for you, then please send me a message privately. All right? So, Josh, please tell us about you, about your origins. Why Japan? Why business knowledge in Japan?
Wow. Why Japan? That's a big question, going way back. I think, so originally, without trying to bore everyone too much, originally I went to a performing arts high school, and I had a teacher there that brought out Japanese art, and we did like sumi-e and black ink painting. And that's what first really caught my attention, and I really just love that alternate concept of how the negative space is just as important as what you ink on paper. And I got into Aikido. I was doing Aikido here, and I think that was originally just really what got me hooked on the culture. And then in university, I took some linguistics classes and language classes and did a summer intensive thing. And then I did a study abroad, and that was to Kansai Gaidai, where I continued with, they did have like an art class there as well. They had sumi-e there. So that was kind of what, had that connection to draw me there at first. Yeah. And so that was what first kind of built up maybe the stereotypical drawn to traditional culture route, as opposed to a lot more people in the anime route now. But, times change. And I think after I came back, I was working in the bookstore. I was a senior in college, and I met my future wife, Satomi. She was, after she graduated high school in Japan, in Fukui Prefecture, she went to Central Washington University. and did a national study abroad to study business. She came to Buffalo. So she was a customer, and I had like the geeky gaijin I was wearing. It said Kansai Gaidai, like in kanji across. It was like my only kanji t-shirt, and I had it, across the t-shirt there. And I was like, oh, I was helping her find her books. I was like, I got nothing though. I thought, I was like, okay, well, all right, maybe she's not from a country that understands kanji. And later on, I through mutual friends, I found out, no, she did. She just thought I was dorky. Or she thought that I had no clue what that meant, which, makes a lot of sense. But, little by little, we became friends, and then we went out. So that's how, so we met there. After I graduated, we were 1 year apart in school. So I joined the JET program and then went to outskirts of Kobe. There's a small town next to Miki. It's called Ono City. It's not a real city, but by population numbers, they say it is. So I was there for 3 years. During that time, she had graduated and she came to originally it was Nishinomiya, and she got a job in Nagai City in kind of lower part of Osaka City. Yeah, and I did the JET program, finished that up, and was the whole time really interested in Japanese language and Japanese culture. So I was like studying privately with tutors and things like that. And I had passed the level 2 and wasn't sure, should I go to Hawaii? Should I go back to the States, study? And I figure, I'm in Japan. There's nothing fully pulling me back to the States yet. So I decided at that time you had to start as a research student. So I started as a research student at Osaka University studying cultural sociology. And then I found my sponsor, and I went on to do my master's and Ph.D. at Osaka University. And at that time, after JET, we had moved and we lived in Osaka for a couple years, and then sort of got tired of we were in near the Tennoji area, Hiranoku, sort of working class, roughish neighborhood. It was fun though. And but we were we kind of want to enjoy some of the slow life. So we rented a house, or got a house in the lower part of sort of northwest part of Nara. So we lived in Nara while I did my PhD, and with the train situation, it was easy for her to commute to keep working at her international company that she had found. So we had our daughter was born there in Nara, and then eventually had some issues with my father. He was getting older, and we had been away for about 13 years at that point. So time flies, and we just figured that, after I graduated, it was one of those things where I was studying Japanese culture, and I was also doing throughout that whole time I gotten into shakuhachi, the bamboo flute. So I was studying. My teacher was in Kyoto, so I would go back and forth all the time there, studying with him. And then eventually I became a performer and a teacher, and released some CDs. And I had 2 dojo in Nara City and then Katsuragi City, where I was living, and kind of formed a little shakuhachi duo. And we performed at we did a national tour, and we were on NHK, and we were with the manzai, and the whole oh wow, look at the gaijin, he does something. So I did that for a while, but I realized that I still am truly passionate about it, but especially in that type of world, I realized that, making a business and a lifestyle out of it, you have to gather a large number of students and you have to travel. Like even the top performers, like the only way they make money, they're traveling all the time. And then there's, a lot of times it's like, you're traveling for sushi kind of thing. And it's like, no, I'm tired of performing for the Ichiman here and there. So I just realized that, I all of the job offers that were coming up were more teaching English. And I had taught at Berlitz for, a while. I had a scholarship from Itoen, the Ocha, the tea company, at Osaka University, which covered most everything, but I was still, teaching on the side a little bit privately. And I had just, it's kind of that standard route. It's like, all right, well, I'm done banging my head on the wall here. It's a little mind numbing. So we figured, all right, it's probably time. Let's go back to the States and see what's going on there for a while and kind of catch up with my parents and my family. And so we did that. And when we got back to Buffalo, weird coincidence, a woman at the university nearby in public relations and the communications department had about a month into the semester, she was retiring that semester and it was just sort of too much for her. And she was like, yeah, I'm done. So they needed a body who had a degree and I happened to, fit. So I got into the university there and I taught there as an adjunct teaching there for a couple years. It got us, the big thing that we were covered was healthcare. So that was the smack in the face when we come back, like, oh yeah, that's, it's not as nicely set up as Japan. That's a big thing you unfortunately got to worry about. So I got in with that, but I knew with my degree and what I was doing, it was, and the whole academic culture here is changing where like, tenure is sort of an elusive thing now. There's a lot of, everyone I was working with and seeing where, they were teaching at like 4 different universities, bouncing back and forth, trying to find that one spot that may give them full time. And it was like, that's not the life I see for myself either. So, with my wife, we realized that, Buffalo was really lacking Japanese food. And we personally were missing Japanese food. And she comes from, she has a business background, but she was brought up in a restaurant family. Her father and then her uncle and her cousin, they've all started different ramen restaurants. And her father has recently retired, but her brother and uncle still have the restaurant in Tokyo. So there's sushi restaurants around, which has always been around. And at that time, and still, there was only one other Japanese person running these sushi restaurants, pseudo Japanese restaurants. Not that they were bad, but it's the same taste like everywhere you go. And it's like, okay, you're all using the same distributor, there's no unique thought put into any of this. We're like, we kind of want to show people that, there is, we kind of took like the Japanese comfort food and we called it, in the beginning, we called it like Japanese soul food. And, Buffalo is similar to like Fukui or like Hokkaido in a way that, we do have a healthy winter half the year, or, a little bit less, but it's, the 4 seasons and that type of thing is really, a part of things here. So we figured, that kind of warming, soup is something that we knew people would really like, but it was an upsell because, you have to sell the culture at the same time. So when we first opened, our first business was actually with my brother. It was like a destination garden center. We had this kind of weird concept, and it was based on like a British style. There's a lot of these type of garden centers in England that combined like cafe, gift center, all of that kind of stuff with like a cafe and plants and that kind of thing. So we had this really great concept and we're going to create this destination spot. Great idea, probably the wrong location. And we also had this like Japanese niche to it. So we were fulfilling like no one's demand, except for a couple people from the city. And what we realized, my wife was running the cafe and she was starting to bring out like some of, you know, her original dishes and things she had learned from family recipes. And that was a real big hit. And eventually, yeah, my brother took uh, a different landscaping job. We shut that down. And then we moved and we went full on restaurant and we set up in the heart of the city. So we went the route of expensive area, expensive clientele, trendy neighborhood, high rent, but we did no paid advertising. So it was all foot traffic, and word of mouth kind of grassroots spread that way. And we got picked up by, you know, a lot of natural, local media attention, help spread the word. And originally we were bold and we went with, you know, we're not going to do sushi. We're not, you know, we're not going to do that. We're going to do the food that we want. Well, that lasted about 2 months, because we had, time and time again, people would come in and sit down, look at the menu and get up and leave. They were like, well, where's the sushi? We're like, we never claimed to be doing sushi. They're like, but you're a Japanese restaurant. So eventually, yeah, we kind of, you know, bit the bullet and we added sushi. And little by little, you know, we had all those problems of like, okay, well, we really, you know, the noodle is really so important. And at that time, there is an authentic noodle maker in New York City, and he was the one who's like supplying like all of the big restaurants in New York City. And you know, we're just for a frame of reference, we're about a 7-hour drive to New York City, so it's not that close. Yeah, we're not right next door. um, so the issue that we had was, okay, we're going to get the top-notch noodles that like Ippuku and, you know, Ippudo and all those guys are using, um, and they would deliver it over, but they had to freeze it. And then we realized like they would only deliver once a month. So we got to this point where, you know, it was the first, so a couple months in, we were selling out of noodles halfway through the month. And then you know, we got stuck and we're like, this is not going to work. And we're not going to build out a whole warehouse of freezer space for them. And then at that point, they had to freeze them to ship them. So it's like the freshness and all that stuff was just gone at that point. So my wife and I went to New York City and we studied with a Japanese soba noodle maker, and he also made ramen. So he showed us how to make fresh noodles ourselves. And we have played back and forth with the soba noodle concept as well, because Fukui is famous for its own sort of inaka soba, or thicker, hearty soba that we really want to bring on, but we haven't been able to do it yet consistently. We do it as a special, but we'll see. It's sort of labor intensive. So that was what we started doing, and that's kind of what also got attention. And then we were able to say this is 100% scratch, house made, and that is something that really connected with people. You know, the you know, different styles of bone broth and the scratch made noodles. It was sort of that one thing that set us apart from some of the competition around, and that was, it was going well, but we also got to the point where it was like, okay, we're doing really well. We can't really do much more business. We were both working in the restaurant, and with the help of my parents, kind of back and forth watching the kids and that kind of thing. But we weren't really making that much money. And we're like, what's going on here? And then we finally realized, okay, well, restaurant profits suck. And, we're not really doing anything wrong. It's just, at this rate, this is what you're going to be doing. You're hustling for like a 3% profit margin. So we knew we couldn't keep up at that rate. So I figured, and it was sort of a dividing point with my wife and I, but eventually she came around. It, Her father, and it's very, the Japanese way is, he was there day in and day out, and he took probably like 4 sick days his whole life. But while they were, he was the only one who knew the recipe. He was the one who made the broth, and people helped and that kind of thing. And it made it really special. But they also, they didn't get much time off. They, and it was more of a pride thing, he wouldn't take time off, that kind of thing. And I didn't want that type of business where we just created jobs for ourselves, we're at that point. And I felt, we're just employees, whether we're doing it for ourselves or not, you're just an employee. So we needed to not exactly diversify. So we didn't create like a franchise, which may have been the smart way to go. We wanted to sort of do something unique based on the area that we chose to expand to. So that was called Sato, after her name. And then we expanded to Sato Ramen, which was more of like a classic ramen bar. Before us, one place had tried to do like ramen, but it was done by a guy who ate ramen in Hawaii once, and that just didn't, like, I think a lot of people kind of saw through that. But the foodie scene and the culinary scene in Buffalo was really coming up. It's sort of a culinary renaissance. For the longest time, it was just like dead, and then it kind of grew. And we were right on the edge of that timing wise. People were like seeing what was going on in New York City, and they're like, we want that too. So we set up near a university. We had done some research, and it's like, David Chang, like all his popular spots are, they're about, within a mile, within a few blocks of multiple universities. And that was sort of one of the keys to helping him spread. So I knew I wanted to be near the one, the largest university in Buffalo that drew a lot of people from New York City and Toronto and international students, because it's something that they were used to. So we didn't have to sort of sell the whole, like, this is ramen, so it was, the cultural side was already built in, and it was, pop culture, and they loved it. So that took off. And that really kind of gave us the footing that we need and the confidence to continue with, pushing sort of like the Japanese soul food angle. And then about a year and a half after that, we then expanded to downtown, the business district of downtown, and that was called Sato Brew Pub. So along the way, we were bringing in, that started off by us wanting to create our own like Japanese influenced beer. We were importing Hitachi no Nest and all these other beers and everything, but by the time it got to the customer, they're paying like $11, which I don't know, sen 300 yen, for like a bottled beer that I could tell was sitting in a warehouse for 4 months in Virginia. And so it's like there's no freshness. You're paying for expensive importation prices, and we're like, Buffalo has a really growing craft beer scene. And we're like, we make really good fresh beer. There's got to be a way that, we can partner with somebody, and, we can bring the Japanese side to it, work on the recipe with them. And we did that at first, and it worked out. But I don't know, our creative juices were just like, well, let's try, shiitake mushroom in there. And they were like, no, that's weird. So we were like, no, I think we can make it work. And so eventually we found a brewer to work with, and together at that time I had also gotten a sake sommelier license in New York City. So sake had been my passion, but we've always been on the fence about, starting a sake brewery, a small one in Buffalo. And the problem is the demand. So at this point we have 3 restaurants and we could supply ourselves, no problem. Business and time wise, is it worth it? We're still on the fence about it, but craft beer, we knew we could make it work. So we built out a brewery in the brew pub, and we did a little bit more of like a izakaya style menu with some variety, with ramen still sort of being like the main staple food there. Yeah, and that's where we're at. Maybe that was a little too long and drawn out. A lot of things happen. I'm 42 now. So that's kind of a summary of, along the way, I became like a Shingonshu monk, and it's not something I'm totally practicing in a way. But that's part of, the trip when I lived in Nara, got connected with Koyasan and that kind of stuff. But so we, eventually it's starting to light up. Maybe you'll see the woods that we live in, but we're out there. Yeah. And that was part of the reason I think we became sort of like I don't know, the type of family that, it's difficult to be 100% happy anywhere. There was things we super loved about Japan, and there were things that we wanted to show the world. There's things that, sort of, little things that irk you. And same thing here. I mean, there's a lot of things that irk us right now. Don't even want to put the news on. But we wanted, we have a creek down there, and we're surrounded in the woods. And now with, I think, technology, we're face to face in a way. So it's, with technology growing, you can be mobile and still be connected to the places you want to be. Yeah, so that's sort of the life summed up there. And then rolling into it, yeah, eventually more and more I was connecting with small business owners and entrepreneurs in Japan, and I wanted to sort of highlight the fact that business in Japan, I was not ever a stereotypical businessman. I was never drawn to that. My parents were academics, and I sort of grew up in that realm. So becoming a businessman per se was never something that I aspired to be, nor was, taught as, it was sort of opposite, it's, that kind of abundance mindset versus, and I did not have that growing up. Yeah, it was, it's more of that mentality of like, just, be satisfied with what you have, don't push the boundaries and that kind of thing. And, little by little getting into small business and entrepreneurship, I realized that, even when I was in Japan, like what I was seeing was very, very much corporate Japan. But, and maybe it was sort of like we were in the Kansai area, the whole time, and my wife's family is everyone is involved in small business somehow. And I realized that there should be a voice for solopreneurs and consultants, and the freelancers are, the freelancer boom is growing, and you can make a living not doing the stereotypical salaryman life. And I think I wanted to promote that to a lot of people. And then I was meeting Japanese people abroad that were doing, they had their own beauty salon or massage place or something like that. So it kind of became, I didn't want to just make it for just people in Japan. I wanted to highlight, basically, Japan related small businesses and entrepreneurs around the world. So eventually I found my niche in podcasting. And that's how I was able to connect one-on-one with, a lot of people and hear their stories and learn from them and share their stories.
Thank you, Josh. I love your summary. That was perfect, man. Thank you so much. Before I ask you a little bit more about the podcast, we have a couple questions from our audience.
Sure.
Herb, would you like to ask Josh the question directly?
Okay. Yeah, you were talking about you spent time working at a university. I was wondering if you had a chance at the university to do any kind of research, maybe on foods. Like I'm in central Japan. I live here in central Japan, and noodles are big here.
Yeah.
Famous. But my wife is from Yamanashi, which is south of here. Totally different kind of noodle. Right?
Yep.
And then they have different kinds of sake in Yamanashi, and here you go up to Niigata, they have all different kinds of sakes. And
yeah.
I was wondering if you had a chance to do any research if that fed into your business.
Research wise, not especially. I think when I was at Osaka University, I took a food and culture class, and it was food and sociology, food and society class. And it was taught half in English, half in Japanese. And that was the first thing that really opened my eyes to, there is no such thing as Japanese food. It's, in Japan, it's so regional. And that was eye-opening for me. In any food genre there is, even in noodles, like you said, it's, the noodles from Niigata are completely different from the noodles in Fukui. And it's, it stems from high culture, high society versus, Inaka soba, which is, it's much more earthy and grainier because the soup base is lighter. So they needed meatier, flavorful noodles as opposed to the thinner noodles that relied more on a darker soup. So that, I think, was the first thing that really opened my eyes to all of the unique food microcultures within each region. So trying to bring that and let people know that back here in the States was, and still is, a hurdle, because a lot of people here are like, I don't really like ramen. I was like, well, what kind of ramen don't you like? And they're like, well, the pho stuff. And I'm like, well, pho is not even Japanese and not even ramen. So, that's sort of like the barrier that we're at here, let alone trying to tell them, okay, there's a shio ramen, but, the shio ramen you're going to find in Hokkaido is not going to be the same in Osaka. So I'd love a lot of the specials and things like that we've brought on to the menus have been sort of like self-researched and a little more natural for my wife, but then we dig into it and we learn, like Kanazawa has its unique take on a type of like kimchi or something like that, sumono, something like that will present as a special and try to highlight a specific regional area that other than the Japanese people is brand new for a lot of people, just to kind of expose the wide variety. And the same thing goes with the sake. We do a lot of, I brought on sake flights. So we do like, three different styles. And I highlight the different regions just to show them like, this is not the watered down ethanol that, sometimes will unfortunately get sprayed in your mouth across the hibachi place. To show them the wide variety of sake and let them realize that, there probably is a sake out there that they will like. They just haven't found it yet.
Yeah. It's the taste of the noodles here varies between not just region, but even between the mountains. There's a mountain chain between where I am and Kanazawa.
Yeah.
And the flavor is totally different. And they say,
Yeah.
originally when I came here, they told me that these noodles are great, and I didn't really believe them.
Hmm.
And I tasted the noodles, and they're right. So I mean, if you're making noodles in the United States, the water is different. The taste is probably going to be different. Have you found anything like that?
The water is different. It's the same that I've seen with the sake brewers here in the States as well. I think one of the things that we tend to forget is that we do have really good filtration systems, and you can, same thing with the beer, we can pinpoint the pH level that we desire. Naturally in New York, we have a harder water, which is quite similar to, certain areas of Japan. And you can add a softener nowadays that was just not necessary in Japan before. So even though there's a lot of talk about, oh, well, we use Hakusan's, beautiful mountain spring water. That's good, but at the granular level, all of that can be analyzed and recreated with science and technology fairly easily now. And you're seeing that with like the large sake brewers and things like that, like Hakkaisan. I mean, yes, they're at the foot of a mountain, but their water it has to be consistent in order for them to get a consistent flavor. So, they are doing a lot of, bringing a lot of technology into manipulating the flavor. And noodle wise as well, we've just used the filter water that we have here, and that seems to have played less of an issue as opposed to like the different amounts of kansui, or the difference amount of, the biggest thing for us making the soba noodles was getting the different, because it's a mixture of like a fine or coarse grain type of sobako. So we had to mix in like 3-4 different types to get the thicker taste and the the color and the texture that we wanted, and that has proven really difficult. The ramen noodles was more of the balancing of the kansui and getting the right almost like al dente chew on it. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Our next question is from Seema. Seema, go ahead.
So thank you very much, Josh, for that.
Hi there.
Hi. So I wanted to ask, do you think that the academic side of your upbringing, do you think that made you more or less hesitant to go into business, and how has that played off?
I think at first, I was very hesitant. I think having been in Japan, though, I realized that it wasn't as much of a hurdle as I thought it would be. From growing up, like I said, it was never something I had dreamt of, and I really didn't have that many people around me that had their own business. So it was almost like not an option. It was just, I was sort of growing up with the mentality, you work hard, you study hard, you get the job and you do what you're told, and that's how it goes. And I think my time in Japan sort of changed that mentality, coupled with in Japan as well, but and here too. I think in the past, the ideal of lifetime employment, like, you got a job and you stayed there and you were good to go. And little by little, I began seeing that was a myth. It's any job can become disrupted. And I mean, we're living in sort of a natural erosion of jobs due to a pandemic. But even, way before that, I think once that clicked, that, you know, you can work hard, and at the end of the day, one of the things that was, and I think it was more of like the creative side to me, is I always wanted to have more control in my life. I didn't want to be controlled and told what to do and where to go and how to do it. But I didn't equate that with business exactly, like running my own business. I equated it more with like artistic and self-expression and that type of thing. It took me a while to put the two together to really realize that, you know, entrepreneurship is a form of creativity and a form of someone bringing something new into the world. And if you can get the money side of that right, then you'll be set. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Did that help? Did that answer it?
Yes, no, it did. Thank you very much.
All right, Sima, thank you for your question. So Josh, let's talk about your platform. So basically you said you started Small Business Japan as a platform to promote Japanpreneurs and all these things. So can you please tell me, what is the importance of having your own platform?
That's a big question. In a way, I think everyone should have their own platform in some form of another. And I think on the small basis, I mean, that could be even just, you know, an Instagram type of thing. Now, as I say that, I technically don't have my own Instagram account. I realized all my Instagram accounts are for the different businesses that I have. That being said, I think I was drawn, you know, podcasting has sort of boomed and taken off here in the States for years. You know, I feel like I'm quite late to the game here, although when I got into it, I was connecting directly with people, having conversations like this. And it was, you know, podcasting was the way to go about it. Because I think orally, you know, there's a deep connection with people more than other platforms. That's how I felt comfortable expressing myself and communicating with people. You know, I had lectured at, you know, university and things like that. So I'm comfortable public speaking. And that might have something to do with how I chose this platform. I think everyone needs to find their best fit, because there's so many different types of platforms. And if you're a visual artist, then, you know, there may be a different platform for you. But I think having that outlet where you can open the doors to communicate with other people is important. Now, it may not be important for everyone, because as you have to realize, this is a, you know, any kind of platform is most likely going to be a public forum. And you have to be in a place where you're going to be comfortable with criticism. And it's at times it can be very hard to separate the criticism of your work and you. And it's something that I think you know, being in the restaurant industry, you develop thick skin very quickly, or you don't last. And Yelp is like, God, you know, that company is, you know, the bane of our existence. Because now that technology and the internet and everything is so open, it's unleashed a lot of, you know, people are free to say what they want now. And you have to realize, okay, that's has more to do with them and their situation and where they're at. They're releasing some type of anger in a lot of those kind of posts, and you got to take it with a grain of salt. But still, you have to be, you know, no matter what platform you choose, you have to be ready for some of that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Definitely. Let's say there are two professionals
Mhm.
Two of them have the exact same qualifications. They're both very
Mhm.
talented. However, one of these people, this guy has a podcast, his own platform, and this guy doesn't.
Mhm.
How can this guy benefit from his podcast? Can it enhance his business? Can it like spread the word? Like, how does it impact his?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think at the root of it, any extra skill that you have that sets you apart from your competition is a plus one for you. Specifically for podcasting, and I lump this in with a podcast or a YouTube channel, because I actually encourage people to possibly start with a YouTube channel before a podcast. But the benefits of the podcast as well is that you have a platform where you can reach a large number of people that you wouldn't otherwise. And I think that's the biggest thing is being able to get attention, and being able to use that attention in a way it will spread your name, it'll spread your word, and that is inherently a leg up on the competition. Yeah.
So regarding competition,
Mhm.
let's say you have your ideas, you want to start your own podcast or YouTube channel or whatever, but you notice that the market is kind of saturated.
Mhm.
There's so
Mhm.
many people doing podcasts, creating
Yeah.
content. How can you find your own voice that will stand out from others? And how did you find your own voice?
Yeah, I think there's it's a mismangled quote, but better isn't better, different is better. Is something that I've always liked that, and I think everyone, it's cliche, be true to yourself, that kind of thing. But even in a saturated market, a topic may be covered, but at the root of it, it wasn't covered by you. And your opinion and your take on it is going to be different from someone else's naturally. And if you stick with that, I think eventually you're going to find more like-minded people that sometimes agree with popular opinion, and sometimes it's contrarian, and you go against the grain. I think that is more of the key to gaining a following, rather than just contributing and being one of those like Me Too companies that it's whether it's positive or negative, yes, you're going to get people jumping on board, but you haven't created a like-minded fan base that can relate to you, not just that one quote, that one thing that you said. So I think by doing that routinely, you have to bring your own opinion and your own point of view. And I think your point of view often comes from the different experiences that you've had throughout your life, and last week, and it's part of your identity. And the more that these platforms can show that to people, and the more that people can relate to you on a human level, the more you're going to create an inclusive community. And I think that's one of the things that, if you can get a community going, that community can grow, because their friend tells their friend and all that. I don't really agree, or it's not agree or disagree, but I don't do paid advertising for like Facebook and that kind of stuff. I understand that you should have an omni platform and be everywhere and all of that kind of stuff. And yeah, if people don't know where you are and who you are, then they just can't find you. So, but I still think that the word of mouth spread is so much more powerful than any paid advertising. Yeah.
100%. The Nightcrawlers grew with
Yeah.
$0.
Yep. Yeah. And that's the way to go, you know, and I like, you know, your format so you're doing video, and I don't know if you're going to repurpose this into a podcast or not. But I think, you know, that I just got into it because I was, you know, a lot of the people that I talked to, I found that they were more comfortable not being on video. So I do record, I do Zoom recordings, and I've dabbled I have the Japanpreneur YouTube channel, but it's just, I haven't had the time to dedicate to it the way I wanted to when I started out, because that was, you know, it was a lot of time. But starting with YouTube may be a better route than going straight to podcast, because you have that extra piece of visual content that you can start with. And although it's not often the conversations, sometimes if they're visual and things like that, you may lose people if you just straight copy it and throw it on a podcast. But there's definitely snippets of conversations and things like that that can be repurposed. And then, you know, you chop that up and you put that on, you know, a smaller Facebook post or something like that. So, you know, there's a lot of different ways that, you know, you can distribute the content now.
Awesome, Josh. So I think one of the biggest fears that us human beings have, I think number one is public speaking. And let's say, you know, there are many professionals who have a lot of opinions. They want to make their own podcast, their own platform, but they're very afraid to speak up, especially nowadays, because people on the internet are quite mean. And, you know, the fear of criticism is quite big.
Yeah.
How do you create a thick skin that will allow you to just like stand up and speak your truth?
I mean, one, I think you have to be committed to wanting to spread your voice, and you have to believe that what you are saying, other people care about. I mean, one of the problems that, you know, you have on like YouTube and stuff, and people say is like, oh, another, you know, video diary where I get to watch someone and listen to their story about what they ate this morning. And personally, yeah, I don't find any value in that. Someone might though. I don't know. You know, it's not my place to judge. And I definitely wouldn't get on there and criticize them for that. That's just not my, you know, I don't have enough time to do that. I try to get the negative out of there because you just don't have that much time in the day. I think that has to be something within you that, you know, you have to have that desire to spread the word. And I think my initial hesitation was that, yeah, I mean, who cares about my opinion? It's just another opinion. And I think personally, I'm not the most opinionated person in the world. And I'm not a debater. I learned a long time ago that most debates are not communicating. It's one person trying to force their idea over on somebody else. But right there, that other person isn't listening. They're forming their rebuttal as you speak. That's not an open, like, platform for discussing things. So in a way, I don't really get into conversations and heated arguments and things like that on social media. It's just not a relaxed atmosphere that I like to contribute to. So I think if you start out smaller, which at this point you're going to podcast or YouTube, I mean, they're growing, but I still think both platforms are small enough that there's a chance to stand out and get somewhere if you can grow your community. But I think the biggest thing in the beginning to remember is that, yeah, no one cares. And I think that's really one of the biggest things you have to accept and enjoy that time that, you know, the beginning stuff is not going to be that great. You haven't honed your skills for interviewing or public speaking, and you might be a little nervous. And 2 years, 5 years, you know, however long you continue it, it's going to be super great if you grow a following that you can go back and, you know, show people, okay, look guys, this was my scared, you know, like, you know, skinny self back then, and I didn't know what I was doing. I started with my smartphone, you know, I didn't have any, you know, tech gear or anything like that. But that's also, you know, I think more and more people like to see the journey. They like to, and your community likes to be part of that growing journey. So don't negate the beginning time that you have when, yeah, in reality, maybe nobody is watching, or listening, but that's a good time for you to keep going. And like I said, practice and learn your skill and get over it. And you really don't have a fear, because truthfully, you know, YouTube is not going to promote your stuff to 1 million people and see what they think unless you've started growing a community, and all of that will happen naturally. Like as you more people start to engage and listen to you, they will promote you more, which will spread you to more people. So I think, you know, enjoy that beginning time of learning, and it's not going to be hardcore criticism. And I think little by little, you'll, I think, naturally develop the skin, because you will have, you know, the positives always outweigh the negatives. You know, there'll be, you know, 50 or, you know, 20 great comments, and there'll be that one guy who was like, meh, you know, whatever. And you'll be like, okay, whatever, something, you know, he's not, it didn't speak to him. That's the other thing. I think if you are niche focused with what you are doing, you can start to develop a mindset that's like, okay, so my conversation was not for him. And that happens a lot with me, like, you know, with Japan related things like that. Like people around here are like, that's a really cool topic. I want to hear about like solopreneurism or something like that. And they're like, oh, but it's about Japan. I'm like, well, it is. I mean, you could still learn something from it, but, and they're just like, nah, it's not really my thing. I'm like, that's okay. You know, it's up to them to, you know, allow that to come into their world or not. And if you can be comfortable with your niche and understand that, you know, you're not meant to talk to everyone. Like very few people are meant for mass appeal and pop culture, but that's something that I think that we can embrace. You know, embrace your quirks, your niche, your uniqueness, and you'll find people that, you know, are drawn to that.
Josh, that was beautiful, man. Keep preaching, man. Keep preaching.
Yeah.
So, Josh, how do you, because I was, I think it was last week, I listened to Anthony's episode on the podcast. And then I just started like checking your Instagram, and you have so many awesome guest speakers. How do you get all those speakers, man? You got to give me them tips.
It's just, it's direct communication. I mean, I think with everybody, you know, I you know, it's tough in the beginning because you're a nobody, and it's convincing a few people that it might be worth their time. And I think starting out early, you know, the one thing that you don't have is you can't promise a large audience, which is also, you know, if you're starting out with dreams of podcasting and making a lot of money, I mean, go sell crack or something. I mean, there's much better ways to make drugs or to make money. But I think that, you know, you find those couple people that are, you know, willing to enjoy a conversation with you for the sake of enjoying it, or for, you know, maybe they really do have a message that they just want to get out to anybody and anybody who will listen. And those are, you know, some of the people that, you know, as long as what they're talking about and promoting aligns with, you know, what you're interested in. Or if that, I mean, if you're, you know, there are a lot of like debate type things where, you know, you don't have to connect with your guest. Sometimes it's, you know, it's the type of thing where, you know, you prod and it become not an argument, but, you know, it's, you know, play the devil's advocate, that kind of thing. Interesting. You know, sometimes the drama is interesting. I rarely do that because it's just, you know, the people I choose, I tend to connect with on some level, that, you know, I may not always agree with every statement, but there's a connection there that I think that, you know, if you choose the right people and you show them who you are and what you're trying to do, I think it can start from there and it can snowball. And I think, you know, just from logistically, I always try to ask, you know, most people have friends that are similar to them. And if you can try to get, you know, recommendations without putting people on the spot, sometimes they will make an actual introduction for you. That's, you know, especially in Japan, that's super critical if someone can make an introduction with somebody. But the other thing is, you know, if they just casually ask first and that person, you know, responds or, you know, little by little, if you've got a few episodes, they can go and listen to it. And they're like, yeah, that sounds like something that I would be into. You can get more yeses that way. I mean, I think people need to be prepared for a lot of, not even no's. I haven't gotten a whole lot of no's. I've gotten a whole lot of just ghosts where it's like, okay, you know, mid conversation, it just ended. And I'm like, all right, you know, and then again, I just chalk it up to, you know, that person has a life, you know, they've got things to do and, you know, who knows, you know, that anything could have happened, which, you know, just takes priority and just the timing wasn't right. Maybe later on their timing will align with mine. It'll work out. But they often say, like, you know, even with business, you know, it's like, and good ideas, like you don't find, you know, you don't have two ideas and one is good. You have 100 ideas and probably one or two is good. It's, you know, it's the times to bat that are going to really bring out, you know, the good ideas. And, you know, you may need to pivot, you know, your initial niche may not be striking a chord with enough people. And you may need to go in a different angle. You know, I've seen people, you know, change podcast names or, you know, like sort of realize that, okay, 75% of my audience like these type of questions. I should probably stick with that. I mean, I think you have to be flexible in some way.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So when you start, so you're doing your own podcast now, can you please give us some advice about some software or equipment that might be good for beginners?
Yeah. I mean, I would recommend, like, probably the two most popular, you know, there's a guy called Pat Flynn. He does SPI, it's Smart Passive Income. He's got a course where it's, I don't even know how much it is. I think it might be like $400. And then you have like lifetime access to a community. And I didn't do that one. I've done Podcaster's Paradise with John Lee Dumas. And his is a recurring yearly fee of almost $1,000. But it's a very active community, and his online membership platform gets updated often. So there's a real connection with a lot of the people on there. As where Pat's is, he updates it every year or every couple years to kind of keep up. So those are probably the two largest groups. I suggest people to get on one of their, I mean, there's probably others. That guaranteed there are others. I just haven't looked into all of them, but I would suggest that because the barrier of entry is so low, that means that the competition is going to keep rising. Now, with, numbers wise, YouTube seems like it's saturated, but there's still a lot of room there. Podcasting, even more room, but the numbers are climbing and climbing. So with the barrier of entry being so low, you're now competing with everybody who just, talks into their phone and records their thoughts for the day, and it just sort of dilutes everything. So you need to set yourself apart. And I believe showing people, and I think this may be part of how I gathered some of the guests, is if you can set up a system where you're taking it seriously. I mean, I like to say like professionally, but it takes a while to gather a sponsor or something like that. But I think if you can show that, you're taking things seriously, this is, a passion project or something more than just your rant about, it's, just some random thing that you hate about Japan, because there's plenty of those podcasts. And I think the other thing is to when you're finding, sorry, this is getting off topic, but finding your niche there is like, listen to what's out there already and don't do the same thing. And just because something is new to you doesn't necessarily mean it's new. It's just you found it. So sometimes when you're discovering Japan, the people who have been in Japan are like, yeah, that's old news. You're not going to gather followers that way. Sorry, tangent. Back to that, I think being able to join something where there is a community that can help you with all of those little tech questions that come up. The tech side of it is fairly formatted at this point. There are, I use Bluehost, but Libsyn is the most common throughout the world of podcast host, the provider. I liked it, but I was just drawn more to Buzzsprout. It was just a little more fresher, newer feeling I got from it. I was originally on a different host, and I went with that because they included sound editing. But what I found out was that, I started using, or I've always used like Adobe for, making videos, and then I realized, okay, Adobe Audition, you could do, I was familiar with the platform. So it didn't take that long to get familiar with the sound editing on Adobe Audition. So once I got comfortable being able to cut and chop little words here and all that kind of stuff, I realized that, okay, it wasn't too much of a time suck to do my own editing. And then I saw that Buzzsprout added a feature that it will do like an overall blanket for sound quality, just to make sure your sound levels are even, which tries to match the sound. And now I think with Zoom and some of the technology, it's gotten a lot better for listening wise. Even 2 years ago, maybe a year ago, you could clearly tell when someone was on a telephone. And, you're talking to a professional podcaster with a microphone, and then the other person in the conversation is like yelling in the wind or something. A lot of that stuff can be kind of cleared up now, which is, the better audio quality that you can get for your listeners is going to really, it's something that you should really take into consideration, because there's, people have said, oh, it's about the content. It's like, no, I'm not going to sit there and listen to something that if it's in the middle of a bar and I have to hear all that background, like that's nice for ambiance, like for 10 seconds. After that, I get it. The whole time is like, no, it just sounds like I'm listening to two blokes chat about something. And for me, that's not necessarily a podcast. So I think making sure you're doing your best with audio quality. I'm downstairs right now because I have a small-ish studio set up, and just so I'm able to hop on real quick, I have a Heil PR40. It's about a $400 microphone with a mixer, and that's set up to the computer, and it's sort of always ready to go because sometimes people like to jump on chats. This is, if you can see, this is simple. It's an ATR 2100. I recommend this for starting out. It's probably like it's under Ichiman N, and it's probably like the most professional that you're going to get for that cheap. So minimally starting with some kind of decent microphone is a big step up from a lot of the competition. And host wise, I know that Anchor is free. I do not encourage anyone to use Anchor though. There's a lot of issues with them. They're a free platform. I get it. What business do you know survives and has no desire to make money? There's things going on. They're going to be bought out. And they also have control of all of your data. I've known somebody who they shut his platform down. No word, nothing. I mean, they have the right to do that. They can just stop it. And they also have the right to reuse all of your content any way that they feel fit. So that includes, taking you out of context like they do on the news. And, it's not saying that they do that, but they can. And it's just one of those platforms that, I think spending, a lot of the platforms are set up by how much time you think you're going to be publishing per month. So, if you're able to spend $10 a month on a platform like that, like do it. Like that's the best thing, because they have, analytics and things like that, the technology for podcasting analytics wise is still in the dark ages, but it's growing. Like YouTube is really good. You know who's watching, when they stop watching, all that kind of stuff. It's a little tougher with podcasting. You really do kind of feel like you're out there alone sometimes. Just because there's so many different outlets for the way people are listening, but that's sort of becoming connected, whether, you listen on, Spotify is growing, and, Apple iPodcast and that kind of thing that's part of the problem, is people are different, listening in so many different areas. So tech wise and getting started, I'm not sure there's anything else. Yeah.
That was perfect. Thank you, Josh. Now let's go to our Q&A session. We have a couple of questions. Let's go with Herb. Herb, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I think you just kind of touched on this, but you were talking about how Yelp is the bane of your existence. I was wondering if you use any kind of analytics from them to improve your restaurant business, or any way you connect the podcast to your restaurant businesses and get some kind of feedback on that.
We have avoided working with Yelp directly. They unfortunately do a really good job, and I do use it for mapping, what's in the area and that kind of thing. And Google as well, they can show a lot of okay, what comparatively, when are people dining, that kind of thing. The problem we have they say you can get more access and more data by advertising with them, but they're a business, and when they want to pressure people to pay more for things, although they say they don't use anything, it's just I don't see them as a very transparent company. As far as promoting with them or anything, I do it on the restaurant websites. I have, and the social media as well. If there's if I have like a sake maker or something like that on the show that may be food related, I will promote that to like the customers via social media or the restaurant newsletter, that kind of thing. I don't try to push it too much because I think I would guess 20% of our dining customers actually care about like the cultural side of it. And that probably includes, half of that are actual, the Japanese people who live here. And then other people really interested in Japanese culture that are drawn to coming to the restaurant. So some of those guests are interested in like the podcasts and the conversations. And some of that, word of mouth spread, when on a particular topic. And I usually keep those topics related to food or drink type of thing. But I would say it's promoted more, on my website and through newsletter, Facebook, that kind of thing.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Josh. Let's go to our last question from Anthony. Anthony, go ahead.
Thank you once again, Angel, for organizing this. And Josh, thank you for waking up early to speak with us.
Yeah.
And basically, I'd like to pick up where we left off on the podcast and flip the questions to your side. So, you sorry?
Oh dear, how much time do we have?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'll try to be specific and brief.
No, take your time. Take your time.
But you're giving us a constant stream of, advice from all these entrepreneurs. And I'd like to know what you've learned from your journey. You've done so many things and in such a short time, in my opinion. So what is some of your best advice for us?
One of the things that really has struck me, and it's sort of like, it was really sort of solidified in our conversation, which, actually our conversation happened, a month or two ago. It took a little while to get it out, but you brought up, or the word solopreneur was mentioned, and that's not necessarily the word I'd like to use. I think I had been reading Company of One with Paul Jarvis, and some of the essentialism and that kind of thing. So I've been more and more drawn to what was popular about 10 years ago is, they call it lifestyle entrepreneur. And I really connected with that in a way that I've seen a lot of the people that I've began interviewing sort of had that naturally built in I think without that term being on the top of their mind. And I think you hammered the point down really, really well, is that I almost debated labeling the show Solopreneur with Benefits, but I thought that was, maybe that kind of clouded the topic a little bit. But you're a solopreneur with strategic partnerships. And I thought that was a beautiful representation of a way that a lot of the entrepreneurs that I've been able to connect with, I'm realizing, okay, you've been able to create a life that you want to lead, and your lifestyle comes first, and you do have those lifestyle freedom and eventual financial freedom, but no one is really alone in this game. And partnering up with other entrepreneurs that are doing their own thing, and freelancers and creatives, you can present yourself as you can have the appearance of a large, formidable company. And I think that's a great thing, that you can take on bigger projects. You can do things that you may not have thought about doing before, had the confidence to do before, but relying on other people's skill sets that complement yours is I've seen through, some of the, people in the tourism industry that have set up a lot of, experiential tourist spots and things like that. It's relying on a network of people who have, similar ideas and goals that, individually we can all sort of create our own special lifestyle connected through business somehow. And I thought, I think that's one of the things that's really caught my attention lately. And I do interview a lot of foreign entrepreneurs. I do like to get the Japanese perspective when possible. And they have sort of done the same type of thing abroad, connecting with other Japanese people or people who have been to Japan. But, we are in a unique position that, including your own perspective, like I said, it comes from your own experiences, and many of us, most of us, have grown up in their own country, so we naturally come with our own outlook on things. And I think a lot of the successful entrepreneurs that I've talked with have been able to keep that perspective. You have to be a global conduit in a way. I mean, that's sort of like in Japan, like fully going Japanese and trying your hardest to become Japanese. Like that's like, okay, that may be a personal goal or whatever of yours, but that does not necessarily benefit Japan in some way, or I guess be relevant to them. So a lot of the successful people I've talked with have not just come in trying to disrupt and, shake things up, because if you come in with that mentality of like, well, in Australia, this is how we do it, so it'll work here. That's not going to work. I think that the best approach is the people who have learned the patterns and systems of Japan. So yes, spending time learning about Japanese culture, learning what floats, what won't float, that kind of thing. And then seeing, okay, there might be a gap here. There might be a little bit of a wedge where maybe I can get some unique perspective in there that won't 100% disrupt things, but it's my way in. And I think that, kind of even looking at like traditional culture, like they say, you don't become the master before you really learn the tradition. Like you have to learn the boundaries, and you have to learn, I guess, where the box is if you want to step out of the box or think outside of the box. Without understanding where that box ends, you're just kind of, just trying something new. And I think, a lot of the entrepreneurs that I've met have been able to bring that balance of understanding Japanese culture and understanding where we can push the limits.
Thank you. For me, a lot of the things you said were just surviving and surviving techniques, but considering your perspective, I'm looking forward to treating that more strategically and consciously. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And I think that's something that you and, everyone else should bring to the forefront, because, we get lost in, things that we know. It's the same thing for like building a course or teaching something. When something becomes natural to you, like you said, or like a survival skill, it becomes ingrained, and you forget that it's new to other people. And it's often like the basics and that kind of stuff that people need to hear, and potential clients as well. They need to realize that your balance, your outside experience, and your knowledge of Japan is something that they need.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Anthony. And the last question, Josh, is from me, which is, what is the change that you would like to see in the world?
The change I would like to see in the world. I don't know about every culture. I think other cultures have a different way of, growing up, but I think more care needs to be spent on allowing kids to grow up in a creative environment. I think creativity is one of the most underrated skills that people have. And even the fact that you call it a skill, some people don't realize that. But, with all of the technology that's coming up that's going to replace a lot of the, menial labor and things like that, it's, as human beings, it's our creativity to critically think and problem solve that some people have criticized that, this is one of Japan's weak points. There's other different ways of looking at that. But I think it starts from allowing children to have that time to be in a creative, hands-on environment and learn by doing rather than, lecture style. And I know, here in the US, they teach sort of, some unique places they do like Montessori and things like that. But then, I hear like in, Finland and Switzerland, like kids go to school for like 3 hours a day and, then they have an hour of outdoor play. I mean, that's, getting back in touch with like nature and being able to express and find their creativity is something that, I think a lot of countries around the world could benefit from. And that is something that I would like to see, because that's a skill that carries throughout your life. And I think it's something that, needs to be appreciated more.
Do you think everyone can be creative?
I think everyone is creative. I think it's an innate quality within everyone. Often when you ask someone who doesn't think they're creative when they were creative, they often say, oh, well, when I was a kid, I did this. And that's because, your imagination is allowed to run free. And that's before all of our judgment was put in place. And when we start judging ourselves based on, what society says is right and wrong, that kind of thing, little by little, the creativity kind of gets dimmed. I also don't think that creativity doesn't equal artist. So I think that's why sometimes, just because, not that I don't think everyone needs to go out and buy an oil paint set today. That's not the only expression of creativity. There's creativity in business and there's creativity in all of life that people use on a daily basis for, okay, there's construction going up here. No detour signs. You need to figure out which way to go to get to work. That is a creative process that people don't always realize is actually a part of creativity. But in that sense, we use creativity all the time. And I would like to see more people get into activities that release that creativity, because that creativity can then apply to work and, life in general.
That was the perfect ending. Josh,
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for, coming to the show and giving us your awesome speech. We really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
I know you woke up early, so
not a problem. Sun's up now.
All right, guys, we are finished for today. Thank you so much for coming. Sorry, Josh, where can people find you?
Everything is if you just want to Google Small Business Japan, I'll be there at smallbusinessjapan.com. The YouTube channel is Japanpreneur, but like I said, it's not so active. I'll do a better job of keeping up to date there, but everything there is, if you want to contact me, it's Josh at smallbusinessjapan.com. All that info is there. That should be good.
All right, Josh, thank you so much. We are finished for tonight. Guys, have an amazing night. Thank you for joining us. And Josh, thank you, man. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good night, guys.
Good night.